Darren Langley is the general manager of Rocket Pool, which is a liquid staking protocol for Ethereum. Liquid staking on Ethereum has been a major trend this year as it enables ETH holders to earn rewards by staking on the Ethereum network while additionally allowing stakers to seek other financial opportunities with their staked ETH. In our conversation, we'll get into Rocket Pool's history since their ICO, details on what it takes to become an Ethereum validator and a node operator, the utility of their native token, the issue of centralization among liquid staking protocols, and more. But first, Darren will begin with an introduction to Rocket Pool.
Rocket Pool is a decentralized liquid staking protocol, and I can kind of break that down a little bit. But on the liquid staking side, we have a liquid staking token called RETH. Essentially, you deposit your ETH into the protocol, and you get RETH back, and that accrues value based on the Ethereum proof of stake rewards, essentially. And then what makes kind of Rocket Pool special is that on the other side, we have a decentralized network of node operators who then stake that ETH and generate those rewards. And we've got about over 3,000 node operators in about kind of 100 different geographic locations. We represent about 3% of the ETH being staked today. And on the liquid staking side, I think we're the second biggest now. I think Binance is coming up quite quickly, but we're number 2.
Nice. And why should people use a liquid staking platform like Rocket Pool instead of just staking ETH directly on Ethereum?
Yeah, so there's actually, with staking, there's actually a few barriers to entry. So first of all, you need 32 ETH, and it's kind of like 32 ETH increments. So you need an exact amount of 32, and then 64, etc. So that's a barrier to entry for some people, and also that you need to be kind of like technically minded enough to be able to run a validator node. Which is easier than is easier than you'd expect, but it's out of reach for a lot of people. So what a liquid staking protocol does is it kind of enables you to stake any amount of ETH, so from 0.01 ETH to all the way up to silly amounts. Any amount of ETH, and you don't have to run a node. That's on the liquid staking side. And then on the node operator side, obviously you run the node, but you don't need as much ETH because you're kind of like sharing the collateral with liquid stakers. In our case, you need 8 ETH as a node operator, and then you're matched with 24 from liquid stakers.
Great. And as a node operator, what other requirements are there? Like, do you need to comply with all the regular responsibilities of like uptime to avoid slashing and all that stuff?
The great thing about Rocket Pool is that we're permissionless. So anyone can be a Rocket Pool node operator, like anyone, as long as you've got the collateral. And the reason is because we don't. Okay, first of all, they bring their own collateral, they bring their own ETH to stake. So they're economically aligned with liquid stakers. So they want to earn a yield on their ETH. And so they are going to do the best job they can to get that yield. The other thing about that is it's also kind of a good behavior bond as well. So if they get slashed, for example, it's kind of like a built-in insurance actually. So if they get slashed, then it comes out of their bond and not liquid stakers. So in that sense, it's kind of like a built-in insurance mechanism and makes it really safe from that perspective. 8 ETH actually covers you for definitely any slashing event, but also for some of the tail risk events as well that can kind of happen.
Node operators need 8 ETH to put up as collateral. They run nodes. And in exchange for those 8 ETH, they don't get our ETH.
No, that's a common misconception. So on the node operator side, it stays as ETH. So they actually need 8 ETH plus 2.4 ETH of RPL, which is our kind of like native token, to stake with Rocket Pool. But on the ETH side, what actually happens is they earn the yield on their 8 ETH. Whatever it is today, like 4% or 3.5%, something like that. And then they also earn a commission on the yield that they earn for the liquid stakers. So the 24 ETH that they're staking, that earns rewards as well. And 14% of that goes to node operators, to the node operator who's generating that yield. So essentially they can actually earn more with staking with Rocket Pool than they can being a solo staker because of this extra commission that they're earning, because they're staking liquid staker ETH on behalf of for them.
Okay, and so that means that liquid stakers who get deposit ETH and do get our ETH in return, is their yield lower than node operators?
Yes, because of the commission that they pay to node operators. It's kind of like that service fee for because obviously node operators have costs. Mm-hmm. They're quite low costs, but they are costs nonetheless.
And they are taking the risk, right, of getting slashed.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. They take the risk. They have to do the maintenance of the node. They have to keep it up and running. They have to make sure that they don't get slashed, and all of that sort of thing. So that's why that goes on. Rocket Pool itself doesn't take a fee. So all of the it's a direct relationship between the RETH holders and node operators.
And so what's Rocket Pool's business model, and how does the native token work?
So Rocket Pool, or RPL, plays two roles. The first role is that it's a form of collateral. So as I said before, they need to post also, or deposit RPL as collateral as well, per validator that they spin up. That actually covers the tail risks. So 8 ETH covers quite a lot of the tail risks, but there's even there are very unlikely tail risks. That's why they're tail risks, but there are very unlikely risks. So things like Rocket Pool is not necessarily. There are two types of risks. There are tail risks. There is correlated slashing and this thing called quadratic leak. A correlated slashing is where a whole bunch of validators get slashed all at the same time. Now, Rocket Pool actually is built in a way, because we're decentralized, we're actually less prone to that issue. But if there was a client bug, for example, then that we could suffer from that. So that would be a case where RPL could be activated to fill any gaps with that. The other thing is this thing called a quadratic leak, which is basically where Ethereum isn't finalizing. Again, this is unlikely. Like if Ethereum isn't finalizing for an hour, people freak out, or even two slots, people freak out. Whereas this is like if it's not finalizing for days. So that's one of the other tail risks that we kind of like take into consideration, and so RPL covers some of those tail risks as well. So that's the first thing is this collateral, or kind of again bolstered insurance collateral. The other thing is it's governance. So although RPL itself is not a governance token, RPL used within the protocol to support staking is governance weight. So that's how we differentiate it. So essentially, you have to be adding value to Rocket Pool to be able to vote in governance.
For all of these mechanisms to be effective, RPL does have to get its values somehow, right? Like to be able to cover for tail risks. I assume like this collateral is sold in the secondary market to cover for these events. But yeah, again, like for this to work, there needs to be some intrinsic value for the token. So where does that come from? So
RPL has been around for quite a while now. So we did the ICO back in 2017. So it's kind of had a value since then, although that would be arguably a very kind of speculative value because we were pre-product. It gets its value by the fact that to be a node operator with Rocket Pool and earn this extra commission, you have to stake RPL as well as ETH. So it kind of like you gain access to that commission via staking RPL. So that's kind of like the first thing. The other thing is it's actually like a yield bearing asset itself, because if you're staking it within the protocol, so RPL inflates by 5% per year, and 70% of that goes back to node operators. So that gets distributed back to node operators who are staking their RPL within the protocol. So currently, about 50% of the RPL in existence is actually staked within the protocol. And so that's kind of where it gets its kind of like value from, is this access to extra yield that you can get through ETH commission and then that sort of thing.
Also, super interesting that you said Rocket Pool had an ICO back in 2017. I had no idea that you guys were around for that long.
It was probably one of the smallest ICOs.
How much was it?
I don't remember, because I came in quite late. Well, I came in like 2018, just after the ICO. I think, I don't know, it was only really a few million once we paid tax.
Oh my God. I didn't realize this, and it's crazy to think, because Ethereum proof of stake was obviously still a ways off at the time. Was Rocket Pool kind of formulated as a liquid staking platform from the beginning, or maybe we can get into kind of the founding story of Rocket Pool.
So not liquid staking. That came later. That came in about 2019, 2020. 2020, I think. So it was actually like pooled staking. It was so actually Vitalik put out this thing called the Mauve paper. And it kind of gave an idea of what proof of stake might look like for Ethereum. And it was also kind of like this thing, we are moving towards proof of stake. It was kind of like the first time that they kind of said, we're going to move towards proof of stake. And so David, our founder, saw that, thought it was a fantastic idea. He was kind of doing Bitcoin mining at the time and said, Bitcoin mining has mining pools. Maybe there's going to be staking pools, particularly if there's a large amount of deposit that's needed. Maybe you're going to need lots of people to deposit to make up the amount. And very early on, that amount was going to be something like 1,000 ETH or something like that. So it was definitely a good idea then. So he kind of had the idea. He started writing code back in 2017. Like before I started, he already had a lot of the first versions of the contracts and that sort of thing kind of ironed out. So I think the first thing he did though was he put out a Reddit post, and it got super high kind of traction on the Reddit post. So he thought, okay, well, this is actually a good idea, so I'll spend some time on it. And then he's been doing it ever since. We went live in end of 2021. So it's been a long journey. So up until that point, we were kind of like pre-product or building in line with Ethereum. And obviously they had a big change from Casper to the Beacon chain. That was quite a monumental change, but we were there for that to kind of figure out how that worked and that sort of thing. So no, it was good. It's very interesting being on the bleeding edge.
Really kind of forward thinking to have started this so far in advance before proof of stake was even a reality.
The truth is, we're not all on the same playing field.
Puedo mandarle dinero a mi familia, pero quién sabe cuánto llegará.
Як ми відновимо все? Як захистимо їхнє майбутнє?
كلما ادخرت ازداد شعوري بعدم الأمان. That's where builders can help. You understand that one unique problem. Let's bring balance to an imbalanced world. Stellar, where blockchain meets the real world.
And so what's your background? Like what inspired you to join this team without even knowing whether something like this would work out?
It's a bit crazy. Especially back in 2018 when I joined about 2 months before the bear market started. So that was fun. I think so. I'm a software developer. My background is a software developer. I got into doing smart contract development. I really loved Ethereum and this kind of like programmable money, and particularly like programmable organizations and that sort of thing as well. I really kind of like those concepts. And so I did a bit of smart contract development. Then I started doing smart contract audits with like a local a developer. We did a lot of kind of like ICO audits and that sort of thing at the time. And then I met Dave at a meetup, at like an Ethereum meetup. We shared a beer and we got on really well. He's a super nice guy. So we got on really well. And then they did the ICO. And then he wanted to scale up the team. And then I came on in like 2018. And then eventually I'd done a lot of kind of like product management and team management and that sort of thing before being a developer. And I kind of bounced around between management and being a developer and being a consultant. So then eventually I became like the general manager to kind of get us to mainnet and kind of like drive things forward.
It must have been such a journey to go from, imagining what this product would look like before proof of stake was even live, and with all the changes that proof of stake had in the roadmap. Like you said, it was like called Casper at first, and then like the beacon chain and the merge, and it was a long process. Like I've been kind of covering the space and seeing kind of the delays in the timeline, and all the ways that proof of stake change throughout its time. To have been building like a service for proof of stake, it must have been pretty nerve-wracking. Yeah,
I think when I started, we were about 3 months off of going live. We were doing like a final beta of things, and then we thought we were going to be about 3 months away from going live, and then they switched to the beacon chain, which then meant that we were like at a minimum of 18 months. It turned out to be a little bit longer than that.
It was like 3 months for 3 years, I guess.
yeah, that's right, exactly. But to be honest, when the switch happened, I think Danny gave us a heads up, and it was obvious once we started kind of getting into it. It was obvious why the Casper contract would not have worked. But also the design was so much better. And so we could definitely see why they switched and why it's worth going down that and doing it properly. So although we were kind of, I guess, disappointed, and there was a long road ahead of us still, we could see it ended up in a much better place, which it certainly has. Like it's an amazing system. So
yeah, I mean, good thing you were able to raise some funds with the ICO, even if it was not a huge ICO like the many you saw back then. But yeah, I've seen this comment that maybe we threw out the baby with the bathwater with ICOs.
Yes,
like so many good projects have come out of that. In hindsight, you see how useful it was to raise with tokens. I
mean, for us, we stayed very, very small. That's why we survived. We stayed very, very small for a very long time. In fact, we're still very small. There's only, I think, we've got a new person starting soon, but we'll be like eight people soon.
Wow.
So that's basically it. I mean, we're 8 people because that's the core team, but then there's like a massive DAO of thousands of people. So that really helps to be able to have that outweighted kind of impact. But yeah, that definitely helps. I think ICOs, I actually don't think we'll get proper decentralization unless we get ICOs back, because you have to, from my perspective, you have to raise funds from the users of your system for decentralization to really work, because ICOs currently or fundraising currently is done with VC money, and although VCs play a valuable role within the ecosystem, it's not necessarily always the healthiest form of funding. because it does, in terms of, well, it's not always the most compatible, is actually what I should say, with the visions that decentralized protocols have.
True. Did you guys raise any venture capital?
So we did one with Consensus. So the Consensus kind of like bought a part of Rocket Pool, but that was about it.
And then, okay, going back to to staking. So there's, I think like the biggest theme this year has been on concerns about centralization in the Ethereum staking ecosystem. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is Lido with its 31.7% of ETH staked right now. What are your thoughts there? Like, is this a concern? Is Lido to blame? Like, what should Lido be doing? Anything, if at all? Should it be on users? Like, yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a tricky problem, to be honest. So, I mean, Lido are doing work in the background, kind of slowly, in my opinion. But I can't really blame them to a certain degree. I think we stick to trying to be we stick to trying to be a solution to the problem. So one of the things is we try to be as competitive as possible to Lido. It is hard because a decentralized staking protocol and one that doesn't take bonds. In other words, I say centralized, but a bonded staking protocol and a non-bonded staking protocol are completely different. Like you can throw as much money at a non-bonded staking protocol and they'll soak it up. Whereas with a decentralized protocol where it's permissionless, you have to take bond. You have to take a bond because you have to have that permissionlessness. And then the other thing is that you because you take that bond, your scaling is harder. And so we have to kind of like innovate out of that problem and kind of like risk manage out of that problem instead of kind of just being able to soak up all that ETH. So our road to scaling is a lot harder. Our road up the mountain is a lot harder. We think the path up the mountain is much better because it's much better for Ethereum. Like the difference is that, Lido have, I think it's 39 node operators at the moment, and we have over 3,000. So that's the difference between a permissionless protocol and a permission protocol. So that's the real difference. The median number of validators per node is 2 in Rocket Pool. So like it's really decentralized. So it's definitely the way to go in terms of that, but it's harder to scale. So and we have to be a lot more kind of we can't trust our node operators, which is good. Like it's fantastic for resiliency. It's fantastic for censorship resistance. Because we don't control our node operators. It'd be a lot easier if we did, but we don't control them. We don't control what software they use. We don't control how they go about doing things. We help them get to that point. We have software to help them, but we don't control anything in terms of that. So so it's definitely the better way to go. It's just much harder to scale up that way.
I'm wondering what the actual impact on the end liquid token holder is. So I think like what token holders are looking for is the liquid staking token that better represents ETH, right? So you're looking for staked ETH or for our ETH to be as close to the ETH price as possible. And I think that's where we see a bit of deviation, sometimes on STEs, sometimes on RETH. But I've seen the RETH token maybe have more trouble sticking to the ETH price. What explains that? Is that also derived from having to place collateral, or what can explain kind of the difference in price?
So RETH struggles on the premium side rather than the discount side. So it tends to be above the so there's two reasons for that. First of all, it's actually the token design. So the RETH is actually a non-rebasing token. So like a rebasing token is one that increases in quantity over time. So as rewards come in, the number of tokens you have increases over time. A non-rebasing token, the quantity stays the same, but the value against ETH goes up. So when we first launched Rocket Pool, we were 1-to-1 with ETH, but as we go along, our ETH gets it's actually worth more than ETH. So it's now worth something like 1.08 or something like that. So that mechanism is actually a lot better. So from a DeFi perspective, it's a lot better because they don't have to worry about rebasing tokens, which DeFi protocols hate. And then the other thing is it's actually better from a tax perspective, potentially, just depending on which jurisdiction you're in. So a rebasing token, you have this like daily event where the numbers going up. With a non-rebasing token, you actually just have two taxable events, one when you stake and one when you unstake. So that's actually better from that perspective as well. In terms of like the actual peg, so our ETH trades at a bit of a premium at the moment because there is such a massive demand for our ETH. And because we're a decentralized permissionless protocol, we have to have node operators that spin up and provide that collateral. And so that is keeping up, but just about. Because we've got such a huge demand for our ETH, which then means that people pay slightly more on the open market for our ETH. We do have a couple of mechanisms though that are quite cool. So when our ETH does trade at a premium, our node operators actually get extra money for depositing into Rocket Pool because there's this like ARB that you can do, and we've actually. Sorry, when I say we, I mean the one of the members of our community wrote a smart contract. We kind of like audited it, but the smart contract does this ARB. That means that it can capture some of the premium when they deposit into Rocket Pool as a node operator. So in actual fact, it incentivizes this premium actually incentivizes node operators to deposit and to spin up validators to capture that ARB. So we've been seeing the premium actually coming down and being it's kind of controlled by this ARB now. Which is fantastic. It actually works on the way out as well. If we ever go into a discount because people are pulling our ETH out, then it's the same thing. They actually exit, they can ARB as well. So it's a good kind of mechanism to control that.
Nice. Is that new?
It's been that the premium ARB. It's probably been maybe a year or six to a year or something like that.
Yeah, definitely a good incentive to get kind of that peg to align. Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor, Unlimit. Grow your business with Unlimited borderless payment solutions. Leverage one of the world's largest proprietary payments infrastructures, available in Europe, Latam, APAC, Africa, and the UK. Now, back to our show. We've noticed that the queue to stake has gone down. How is that affecting you guys, and why is that happening?
I think there's a combination of things. I think certainly there was a massive in like May, June, July. It was all on. The queue got to something like, is it 40 days or maybe 35 or 40 days or something like that. So just getting through that backlog of demand took quite a while. I think the TVL across all of DeFi is kind of contracted quite a bit. Staking is actually one area where we're still growing, but we're just not growing as quickly as we were before. So we're still taking on we're still growing, but and getting more stake, but we're just not growing as quick. And I think so. There's this combination of market condition and the fact that the buzz around the mergers dropped off a little bit, and now it's kind of like business as usual, ideally.
And also, I think treasury rates, right? They must have a huge impact on demand for stake, because right now treasury rates are pretty similar than just staking on Ethereum. at 3.5%. So how do you think Ethereum proof of stake can be sustainable in a macro environment with higher rates? Like, what happens if, rates stay at similar levels, or like even, I don't know, in the future beat are higher than Ethereum staking rates?
So, there's a few things there. So, bonds are sucking the life out of everything. I think even equities are struggling with bonds being so high. So, with staking in general, I think it's actually a clever mechanism in the sense that it's self-healing, I guess, to a certain degree. So as demand is still going up, but it's just less so. We're still getting more stake. It's just the demand is dropping off. If the demand continues to drop off and we start going into a contraction, then that's actually quite a good thing in the sense that as validators kind of like drop off, the staking rate goes up. So it does find a natural equilibrium. It's part of the design of ETH. To be honest, like the number of people staking though, there's different reasons for staking. Yield is definitely one of them, but also people do want to secure the network. So there's a very, very large community of people who want to secure the network, and obviously there's an overlap as well. There's people who just want yield, people want to secure the network, and then there's this big overlap as well. So I think that's perfectly fine. I think we certainly have enough economic stake to. The amount of economic security that we have is absolutely amazing, and if it dropped off a little bit, then that wouldn't be a huge issue. At the moment, I'm kind of like not seeing that necessarily. I think it's kind of like flat, rather than dropping off. But we'll see over time how that works out.
I wonder if taking this scenario to an extreme, like say for some reason we're in a really bad macro environment, bond rates need to rise dramatically. And it just doesn't make any economic sense to keep money in proof of stake networks, including ETH, and everyone is just, buying traditional bonds. I mean, in that scenario, ETH would just lose all its security. I mean, taking things to like an extreme, does like the rate Ethereum offers, does it react quickly enough to attract people back? Or I don't know, like how quickly does it self heal?
I mean, it's a market system. The only issue that it has is that there's a churn. So or there's like a churn delay. So exiting is like a minimum amount of time that you need to wait, and they can only process so many exits at one time. So that would be the only thing in terms of if a whole bunch of people exited, they'd have to wait in a queue to exit. But it can actually happen very, very quickly. People can exit validators, and in fact, like in Rocket Pool, people exit validators all the time, and that sort of thing. So you definitely see that. I think the extreme. I'm more of a kind of like wait and see what happens.
It's not very reassuring.
But at the same time, the system does. The system responds to that. So as I said before, as validators exit, the yield goes up, and in fact, as market volatility, if the market is volatile as well, that's actually good for yields in ETH staking, because. So at the moment, crab markets are terrible. Like, crab markets are terrible because nothing's happening. The gas fees are so low and everything else. Whereas if you had market volatility, if you had like things going down, even if it was going down, that would be better than a crab market for ETH staking yields, because the execution rewards that you get are based on transaction fees and MEV and all that sort of thing. And so as volatility comes into the market, those yields would then go up as well. So it's again, this thing, if that was to happen, you'd get more volatility, and you'd also get the consensus layer rewards going up. And so you'd actually, the yield would actually go up. So it would kind of self-heal from that perspective. Going
back to the centralization question for a little bit, because I think we got kind of sidetracked.
Yeah.
So you said you focus on providing a better solution than kind of the bigger players, and hopefully that will get a proof of stake to be more decentralized. But right now, what's the actual risk of having about 30% of stake concentrated on one player? Why are people so concerned about this?
So there are two risks in terms of there are individual staker risks, and then there are protocol wide risks. So the protocol wide risks, there's a good post by Mike Nugent on these risks. But one of the main things for me is that controlling over 30% of the stake, first of all, you can control finality. So you can stop finality, which is obviously a terrible thing, because if the chain's not finalizing, it's not doing its job. That's the first thing. So you could essentially hold the chain hostage at that point. Now, I'm not saying that Lido would, but they would be capable of doing that. And the thing is, it's not that they would necessarily burn the house down, because that's what they could do. They could burn the house down, but then everyone would react to that. It's the fact that they could do things that are grey on the spectrum. So things like preferential treatment for order flow. Things like basically changing the neutrality of the chain to benefit themselves. Now, to a certain degree, that happens with MEV anyway, but they could do it on a very grand scale and on a very consistent scale, and extract far more value than most people would be able to extract in terms of MEV. So that is definitely, for me, that's probably the biggest worry. There's all these burning the house down scenarios, which are bad. They're less likely to do that because they are kind of not, they're reliant on Ethereum. But there are a lot of ways, because they are a profit maximizing entity, they could start extracting value on a much harder scale, undermining the principles of Ethereum in sense of censorship resistance, credible neutrality, and openness. So you can shut down a lot of that stuff by having that much stake. The other thing is on a per person or per staker perspective. So without taking a bond, and Lido at the moment have, per node operator, they have 1%. Each node operator they have has 1% of the stake. Okay. Now that's an awful lot of stake to be on one node operator. Now, Ethereum's proof of consensus mechanism, as I said before about correlated slashing means that if you get slashed with a whole bunch of other people, with a whole bunch of other validators, your penalty is like exponentially more higher, right? And so if they don't have bonding, they don't have they have like an insurance fund, I think, but it doesn't really cover the amount that they've got. So what that means is they have to pass those penalties on to their stakers. So one node operator fails, takes down 1% of Ethereum, they get slashed horrendously. And all of that gets passed on to the consumer or the staker. So that's the per staker risk as well, which is why we've been kind of saying you shouldn't put all eggs in one basket. Even Rocket Pool, you shouldn't put all eggs in one basket. you should diversify your stake, particularly if you're a larger holder. But also, Rocket Pool itself is, we don't suffer from that same issue of correlated slashing risks. And not only that, we also have bonds to cover all of that, or bonding to cover all of that damage.
By correlated slashing risks, do you mean that, so each Lido node has 1% of Ethereum staked.
Yeah.
And if one of those nodes were slashed, the amount that they'd be slashed would be higher than normal because they of the amount that they control. Is that how it works?
Yes. So, actually, the way to say it is a normal slashing would cost something like 1.5 ETH or something like that. But that's if you get slashed randomly, right? So, or if you get slashed and then within a certain time period, lots of other people get slashed at the same time, that becomes a correlated slashing, and it means that the penalty that those people pay for being slashed increases. So it can actually take all of your in the worst case scenarios, it can actually take all of your 32 ETH. So that's that's kind of like the correlated slashing case. And because they've got 1% of the network, if that 1% was to get slashed all at the same time, now they've probably got safeguards to kind of like break it up and that sort of thing, but there's still, technology risks happen all the time. And even Amazon, go down, like a whole region will go down. So, and so a whole node operator, could essentially go down. If they get, or actually particularly if they get slashed, but if they get slashed, it means that they will take out 1%, and 1% will be correlated slashing, and then they'll be penalized much, much harder.
I think the argument I've seen is that node operators on Lido are independent parties, so they can't really, coordinate or collude or anything like that. Do you think that's fair?
Well, they can. They can. Now, whether they will or not, they're known entities. They're known to each other because they have to coordinate between each other. So not only there is communication channels open between those parties. I think also the fact that the Lido DAO controls, who can be a node operator is a big contentious point. Particularly how centralized the Lido DAO is in terms of like token distribution and that sort of thing. So that's a big thing in terms of if node operators, if they wanted to force node operators to do a particular thing, they could, because they could just kick them off. And so, that's definitely a factor as well.
The only thing to do about it is, from your perspective, is to offer an attractive competing service.
Yeah, a permissionless service, where node operators don't know each other. We got 3,000 node operators. They're in loads of different parts of the world. They all run different setups. They're all very different people, very different individual node operators. A lot of them running from home. Some are businesses as well. We're getting staking as a service businesses being built on Rocket Pool. So we just got like this ecosystem of stakers and node operators and that sort of thing.
So here's something new. Bumper your assets to defend them from price drops without losing upside exposure. You set a price floor and term length, then lock your tokens into the protocol. When your term ends, if the price has fallen under your floor, you leave with stablecoins at the floor value. Otherwise, you just take your original asset back. Benefit from 30% cheaper premiums than options, or earn 3 to 18% real yield as a liquidity provider. Bumper just launched and is offering a share in $250,000 of Bump tokens to early users. I think it's important for holders of these liquid staking tokens to have different options of actually using these tokens. I think maybe that's another way that Lido competes is, they're so big. A staked ETH has just become very integrated with DeFi. So from our ETH like ecosystem, what can be done with this token, and what sort of integrations are you working on? Yeah,
so actually those integrations, particularly DeFi integrations, take so long to kind of like build up. It took us like a year at least to build up substantial kind of like integrations. There's a few reasons for that. I kind of like to say it as it's like a Maslow's hierarchy of integrations. At the bottom, you have to have liquidity. And for a very long time, we railed against liquidity mining and liquidity incentives because we didn't feel that it was very healthy. Or it was kind of like a stopgap to what should have been better designs. But we ended up having to kind of like do liquidity mining, or at least the DAO does. So we have a management committee that within the DAO that does that liquidity incentives.
Do you do that with RPL?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, and now the percentages are slightly different, but I think it's something like 22% of the RPL inflation goes to our protocol DAO, and a lot of that, like 50% of that, goes on incentives. So then we have this management committee that essentially directs those emissions or those rewards to different liquidity providers on L1 and on L2 and on lots of L2s. So the idea there is that we build up this liquidity position or this base of liquidity, and then from there you can then start getting into lending protocols, because you can't get into a lending protocol unless they can liquidate at a low slippage. So that's why you need lots of liquidity, and that's the hardest thing for a new protocol, is to build up that liquidity. So that's the first thing. You get liquidity, then you get Chainlink Oracle. Once you get like Chainlink Oracles, then you're into lending platforms, and then it goes from there. So lending platforms then. Usually there's lots of yield aggregators, and you know this anyway. I'm talking to.
It's good to have the framework for sure.
Yeah, but then there's also really interesting things happening. So there's definitely like options platforms and that sort of thing as well with liquid staking. But then there's some really cool liquid staking based stable coins. There's lots of those coming out at the moment. They're going to be quite interesting. Hopefully a lot of them work. But essentially stable coins that give you interest, which at the moment, with centralized stable coins, they don't give you interest. They keep all that money for themselves. Whereas with a decentralized stablecoin based on a liquid staking token, you can actually give interest back to those holders. So that's a really exciting prospect, and we're looking forward to kind of like seeing those develop over time. There's some really being a yield bearing token is based on what is considered quite a safe form of yield. Is very valuable within the community and within DeFi to innovate, and I think that a lot of innovation will come out of this. They're starting to call it LSTFi and that sort of thing, but that's
which lending protocols are ETH accepted as collateral? Currently,
we are in Maker, but we're transitioning out of Maker into Spark. So we're in Spark and Aave and some other ones as well, but they're the main ones. We're in Spark and Aave.
Okay, cool. Super interesting what you were saying about the stable coins backed with liquid staking tokens. Is this something that Rocket Pool would like issue itself, or is it like you would work in partnership with other teams? So being 7 of us, we tend to try and keep our scope quite small. Mainly, there's a philosophical reason for that. We like to do one thing and do it really well, and the protocol itself
there's so much work in the protocol. We've probably got enough work for 10 years, just working on the protocol itself. So we focus on the protocol itself, making it as scalable and as competitive as possible. But we also, and obviously there's governance stuff as well that we will work on, which actually is in our next release. And then we kind of work on that. But we do try to build features in that trigger this innovation or help to support the innovation and let it be a platform on which to build things on. So that's definitely something that we've been doing recently in terms of what in the roadmap, making sure that we have features in there that help with integrations and bring in more stake, but also help people innovate on top of Rocket Pool.
What are some of the major or the most interesting liquid staking backed stablecoins that you're seeing?
That's a great question. I wish I'd prepared that earlier.
Okay, that's fine.
I wish I'll need to double check, but I think Gravity is one of them. I'll need to double check.
No worries.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, and then you mentioned your next release. So what are some of the the things that are coming up that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, cool. So our next release is called Houston. All of our release names are kind of rocket themed, obviously. Houston is named Houston because it includes a lot of governance stuff. So it's like the command center. So currently Rocket Pool has 2 DAOs that kind of part of its governance. It has an Oracle DAO, which is made up of 15 Ethereum organizations, or very high profile organizations, people like Gitcoin, Consensus, Coinbase, Sigma Prime, who do Lighthouse, Nimbus, and lots of other people. So there's 15 high-profile organizations, and then there's also our protocol DAO. Now, protocol DAO is what I mentioned before. It is based on node operators who are staking RPL within the protocol. So essentially, our node operators form that protocol DAO. Now, currently, we as the core team manage some of the PDAO features, or on behalf of the community rather than the community doing themselves. There was a number of reasons for that. First of all, we weren't comfortable with the current way that token voting worked, so we needed to have some sort of vote thing in place. So that hence why we went with Snapshot initially to refine what that vote weight was going to be. That's kind of working really well now in terms of we're comfortable with that kind of like process and that vote mechanism. And then we also needed like the DAO as an organization to form, which is an underrated stumbling block. So you actually need a bit of a bureaucracy class within the DAO to kind of like form and have these really engaged kind of participants within your community take on roles. And that doesn't come very quickly. So that organization now is formed, and there's this process around all of that sort of stuff, and in terms of how we get decisions made and how we collaborate and that sort of thing. So we're a lot more confident in terms of that. So with Houston, it gives that protocol DAO on-chain power. So they'll control certain parameter changes within the protocol. And they'll also control treasury spends. So they'll be able to kind of direct funds to different management committees or to projects and that sort of thing. So that's the PDAO part. And then we've got 2 features that help with integrations. So there's one which is like a separate RPL withdrawal address, and one that allows ETH to be staked on behalf of a node instead of because currently a node operator needs to take custody of the funds to stake it, because it's assumed that it's their funds. Whereas in these 2 new features that we've got, it actually has some different models. You can have some different models where they're not necessarily the funds of the node operator. They could be funds supplied by a third party or still an internal party, but just a treasury, like a treasury department or something, where they or it could be a protocol. So it could be a DeFi protocol that supplies RPL, for example, or ETH that goes in. So it's very, very open in terms of what that would look like, but they support those sorts of integrations. We also have another release called Saturn coming next year, end of next year, and that focuses again on scaling. So actually, Ethereum will release their Dankun release next year, and that includes an EIP called 4788. And which is absolutely amazing for decentralized staking protocols. It is game-changing. So we're taking advantage of that feature to make make Rocket Pool super efficient, and also potentially change our bonding curve as well. So essentially, node operators could require less than 8 ETH to actually stake. So you might need some initially, but then it kind of like drops off. So anyway, we're playing around with that. There's a lot of analysis that goes into that, but that's essentially the big headline things for that.
Amazing to see a DAO that actually works, that is performing the functions of a DAO. Are those contributors being paid a salary or like in RPO, or like how are they incentivized?
Yeah, that's evolving. So there are roles that get paid. Roles might even be one role. I think there might be one role. There's like an administrative role that gets paid, but no, generally they're not paid at this stage. But we are kind of evaluating what that might look like. It's very, very difficult. You kind of want a combination of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, because if you just lean on paying people, you lose something. You lose like a heart. You know what I mean? So there needs to be a way of having intrinsic and extrinsic motivations or incentives built into it. So we're trying to figure out what that kind of looks like. At the moment, it's a lot of passion. People do this thing because they want Rocket Pool to work, and generally because they want us to take market share from the leader. So yeah, that's kind of that. Yeah, I think it's a lot of kind of passionate people. As I said, so we've been around for a long time, and there was a benefit of having all that time in pre-development. So from 2017 basically to 2021, we had time to build a community of users, a community of people who were just interested in Rocket Pool, interested in staking and that sort of thing. And that whole time we were building up this community of thousands of people. And so that was a huge benefit for us, because when we went live, we had hundreds and hundreds of node operators all clamoring in to get into the protocol. They were literally competing in gas wars to get into the protocol. So wow. So it really was, so that community is kind of like seen us through and only grown since the merge. So they're very, very passionate, and it also helps to have like a mission, a mission and a vision of what you want to do. Those things help to draw people in and to engage them and that sort of thing. So that's probably the first place to start, is building a product, is have a mission, have something that you want to achieve, and then you attract a community, and then eventually a lot of them get activated enough or engaged enough that they will want to participate in governance. But even that part is very, very difficult, because we have thousands of people in the DAO, thousands of people who actually, or hundreds of people that vote or could vote. Then participation though is done tens of people rather than thousands. So it is a challenge for DAOs to engage and participants. But I think we've done quite well. I think we get over 25% quorum. That's via like a delegate system. People delegate to delegates, but it's like a liquid delegate system. But we usually get about 25% quorum on most of our votes. So that's pretty good. we seem to be doing okay. It's keeping it collaborative is a major thing. We work with the community. We throw out ideas. They give us feedback. They do analysis for us, and they give. Most of the great ideas have come from the community, not from us. It's becoming more and more so that it's actually flowing back the other way. We get an awful lot of value as Rocket Pool, the protocol, from kind of wisdom of the crowds and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I mean, you are in a really enviable position. I think it's what you've been able to build over time. This actually, working community is what a lot of DeFi is trying to achieve. So great to see kind of I guess like a successful case for DAOs, even if participation is still low. I mean, the fact that there's like thousands involved and that you're getting actual kind of good feedback, not just like one token, says a lot. So
yeah, that's right. But I think it's also the key to that is the fact that the users of our system are the voting body. So having that mission and the fact that they use our product means that there is definitely speculative kind of like demand and all that sort of thing, but it tends to focus on the mission that we're trying to achieve and the product itself, developing the product, and so we're collaborating on that rather than collaborating on making the token price go up. That's not what we're collaborating on. We're collaborating on achieving our mission and making the product fantastic for all participants. So it's participatory governance in a sense.
So to wrap up, what is that mission? Like, where would you want to see Rocket Pool 10 years from now?
Yeah, so obviously we want to keep Ethereum decentralized. Ethereum is doing well, but the centralization of stake is definitely worrying. And so our mission is to keep. It has always been to make sure that we help decentralize Ethereum as much as possible. We've said that we will limit our growth to 22%. I mean, that's not a hardship necessarily. That's quite a big number. So from our perspective, that would be absolutely amazing if we got to that point. But there's so much room that we need to grow. I think there are definitely things to be proud of. Or in terms of the mission, it's about designing the best product that competes with centralized, that outcompetes, not just competes with, but outcompetes centralized, so that people, it's a no-brainer to use a decentralized protocol because it's just better, easier, and everything else. That would be amazing if we could do that, and then from the community and organizational perspective, feed into improving how DAOs work, providing that kind of experience so that other people can replicate and that sort of thing as well. And for lots of different use cases, it's not necessarily staking.
Awesome. Darren, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the conversation. Super interesting stuff. And I think it's a really important mission to keep Ethereum decentralized, because otherwise, what's the use of using a blockchain if it's not? So,
that's right, exactly.
And again, great to see a good working example of a DAO and actually, decentralized protocol. So, thanks so much. It was really fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.